This happened only a week ago, so I'm still pretty shaken up from it. I'm currently staying at my friend's house because I refuse to go back home yet. My brother is a couple of years older than me, and last weekend my parents left me home alone to go drop him back off at his college dorm. His school is in the next state over, so my parents, not wanting to drive 8+ hours round trip in one day, planned on staying the night there in a hotel and then coming back Sunday afternoon. I have no problem being home alone. In fact, I find myself to be more relaxed when there's not someone always bothering me throughout the day, my mother. However, 1 or 2 nights is my limit. Once it gets dark is when my paranoia sets in. Being a teenage girl, I have practically been trained to always be scared for my safety. I can't tell you how many late nights I've spent reading stories of women being followed, harassed, and even kidnapped just because of the sole fact that they are women. The Sarah Everard case royally fucked me up. So even though I live in a nice house on a quiet street in a safe neighborhood, I just can't help but think, what if? Technically, I wasn't going to be completely alone, as I live with 4 dogs, but 2 of them are little, barely reaching 5 pounds, and the 2 bigger ones are still puppies, the girl being the shyest and sweetest, and the boy being a dopey, clumsy mess. So if someone were to ever break in, they would no doubt lick him and try to make a new friend. Not much help or defense in that department. My family left early that morning before I woke up. It was a nice day. My coach had canceled my practice, so I had plans with my friends later that evening to go downtown, get dinner and ice cream, and look in the boutiques. My best friend had just come home from a month in Europe, so all in all, it was a fun and exciting day. After driving around for a little bit, my friend dropped me off back home at around midnight. The first thing I did was do a sweep of the house, locking the doors and windows and closing all of the blinds. I refilled the dog's water bowl, as it always gets filled with dirt from the 2 big ones, always digging in the backyard. I turned off all the inside and outside lights, even the lamps that we always keep on. I keep telling my parents it's a waste of energy, and I turn them off. But I always wake up to them being turned back on, because the dogs need to see whatever. So I turned on a little nightlight in one of the kitchen outlets, so the dogs can see if they got up throughout the night for water or something. I went to my room, took off my makeup, got changed into pajamas, then got into bed. Because it's summer, my sleep schedule is absolutely horrible. At that point, I was going to bed by 5 a.m., so I usually spend my time watching movies and YouTube and sometimes getting to my summer homework. That night, at around 3 a.m., I was watching a podcast and starting to slowly doze off. I must have been asleep for no more than a minute when I shot straight up in my bed from the loudest bang I had ever heard in my entire life. I am a very heavy sleeper. I have slept through some pretty gnarly thunderstorms and even turbulence so bad that nearly crashed our plane. Once I'm out, I am out for the night. Nothing has ever been able to wake me up. That's how loud the bang was. Surprisingly, though, my dogs didn't start barking, and they bark at everything. My mind immediately went to, my neighbors are setting off fireworks for some reason, which is not far-fetched at all, as I'm always hearing people using fireworks at night in my area for whatever occasion. But usually it is very far off in the distance that sounds closer to thunder, and it never gets my attention. I lied back down in bed, but I was fully awake and alert at that point. Something had just felt off. That's when I started questioning if it was a gunshot. I had never heard one before, but it wasn't totally implausible. I got up, opened my door, and called for the dogs to come into my room, which made me feel more at ease. But that was short-lived. At around 3:10, my heart stopped as I heard a loud thump come from downstairs. I double-checked to make sure all of the dogs were with me, and they were. That's when I heard the footsteps, big heavy footsteps in my kitchen. I darted for my bedroom door and closed and locked it. One of my dogs started to growl, but I quickly shushed and pet him to put him at ease. My mind was racing. I tried to reason with myself that there is no way someone could be in my house. My parents would have let me know if they were coming home early, or I would have heard the garage door that echoes throughout the walls. I had also triple-checked that every single door and window was closed and locked, and the windows are impossible to try and open from the outside. That's when I remembered the dog door. We had just installed a dog door for the puppies. We adopted them only a few weeks ago. Since they're big, so is the door. More than big enough for a grown person to fit through. I know this because I've tested it to see if I can use it to sneak out, and I'm a large person all around, being nearly 6 feet tall and pretty bulky. That night I had completely forgotten about its existence, as it's part of a side door down a small hallway in the mudroom where we have our coats and shoes out of sight and mind. We usually only put the cover over it when the landscapers come or if there's a storm. If I had remembered that night, given my paranoia for these exact instances, I would have definitely covered it. I was continually softly shushing my dogs so they wouldn't make any noise. I was still in a state of a bit of disbelief and absolute terror. Then I heard the kitchen sink running water. At this point, I was sitting in the corner of my room, furthest from the door, shakily holding my phone. I had 911 typed in the keypad this whole time, but was terrified to tap the button. I had never called 911 before. And what if it was all just a big misunderstanding? I pulled my cover off my bed and over myself to try and muffle my voice as much as possible. At 3:13 I called. My heart skipped with every time the phone rang. Then I felt it stop completely when I heard the operator answer. I whispered as low, yet audibly as I could, saying, "I think someone is in my house." I told him all of my information, that I was alone, the dog door, I was locked in my room, etc. I also told him where the spare key to the front door was. For when the police got there, I begged him not to hang up on me, which I know he wouldn't have done anyways, but at this point I was completely hysterical. I could barely breathe as I silently sobbed and covered my mouth as to not make noise. The operator tried to divert my attention by asking me questions about myself and my family to calm me down. I kept repeating over and over, "I'm so scared. I'm so scared. I'm so scared." Around 4 minutes later, I heard a banging on my front door. Then I heard it swing open. At this point, my dogs were going apeshit and jumping to get out of my room. Even though I knew it was the police, I refused to move. They had to kick in my doorframe. When the cops found me, I was a blubbering mess, barely able to get a breath in. They took me to get assessed by paramedics that were outside, just in case I only allowed the female providers to touch me. They were the only ones I felt safe with. I needed high-flow oxygen because I was still hyperventilating. Fast forward later that next day, it turns out that what had happened was my neighbor, in some sort of manic episode, psychotic break, unsure of the proper terminology, here had stabbed his 2-month-old baby and shot his wife in the head while she slept, then broke into my house to try and wash off their blood. They found him less than a quarter mile from my house trying to escape on foot. When asked why he did it, all he said was something along the lines of, "They just wouldn't shut the fuck up." I learned that my neighbor actually had schizophrenia, and since the birth of his baby, he hadn't been able to keep paying for his medications. In the end, all I feel is sadness for that poor family, and how preventable their deaths could have been if necessary medications like my neighbor's weren't a luxury item. I still haven't been able to wrap my head around this. My family and I have had many conversations with him and his family. We helped them move in. I even talked with them about babysitting their son. I think the greatest blessing was the fact that throughout the duration of these events, my dogs did not start barking. Who knows what would have happened if they did? In his mental state, I think he was capable of anything. I'm eternally grateful to just be sitting here able to share this. My parents have not stopped checking in on me and apologizing for leaving me alone. I hate that they feel guilty. How could have anyone known this would have happened? I am unsure of the details of my neighbor's sentencing or conviction or anything like that. To be honest, I can barely bring myself to learn about any more of what happened right now. I'm just working on trying to get some rest, because after that Saturday I haven't been able to sleep since.